The people getting the best results with AI aren't trying to automate everything. They're using AI to handle the heavy lifting, while humans stay focused on strategy, creativity, and decision-making. In this video, I'll show you how to build a human and AI workflow that helps you grow your business. In this first one, we look at the AI bottleneck shift. In the explainer, we look at the reason for businesses producing more content, but getting worse results.
Welcome everyone to this explainer. I'm acting as your senior productivity consultant today, and I am thrilled to have the executive team here for this briefing. Look, we're here to diagnose a very specific and frankly, a very expensive problem. You've all made massive AI investments, right? But you're scratching your heads wondering why those investments aren't showing up in your bottom line. Well, we've got the data, we've got the research, and over the next few minutes, we're going to break down exactly where your operational flow is snapping, and more importantly, how we fix it. Here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the AI productivity paradox, then define the novelty bottleneck, and unpack the absorption capacity crisis. After that, we'll weigh the risks against the structural benefits, and finally, transition to actionable flow metrics. Let's get right into it. Section 1. The AI productivity paradox and the rise of the super productive employee. Before we get into what's broken, we actually have to acknowledge what's going right. At the micro level, the individual gains are absolutely unprecedented. Research from the Asana Work Innovation Lab reveals that right now, about 10% of your workforce are what we call super productive employees. These folks are literally saving 20 or more hours a week using AI. They're treating AI like a teammate, pushing through the initial friction and applying it to complex, high-leverage stuff like data analysis and strategy. Their individual output is completely off the charts. But you know, this brings us to the million-dollar executive question. If your top performers are moving this incredibly fast, why isn't this massive speed increase showing up in your bottom line? Okay, let's dive into this, because the answer actually lies in two distinct structural bottlenecks that we need to unpack. Section 2, the novelty bottleneck, and why human effort scaling stays stubbornly constant. This first major diagnostic framework explains why human effort just flatlines on certain tasks. Think of human AI collaboration as a mix of specifying, verifying, and correcting work. Now, AI dramatically speeds up routine, everyday work, basically dropping human effort to a flat, irreducible baseline. But, and this is a huge but, for novel decisions, the ones requiring real human judgment or intent, the effort you need to specify and verify scales linearly with the size of the task. If a task is novel, human effort stays proportional to it. There are simply no shortcuts here. This visual brilliantly lays out where work actually falls on the spectrum. Just take a look at the lower right quadrant there. High novelty, low verifiability. We're talking about big swing items like product strategy or frontier research. These remain totally bottlenecked by human verification. You can't just throw 50 AI agents at a strategy problem and expect it to go faster, because a human still has to serially read, react to, specify, and verify that output. We're essentially compressing all the routine execution, which leaves that novel human insight as the core, unrushable bottleneck. Moving to Section 3, the absorption capacity crisis, or as I like to call it, Formula One drivers on horse-drawn roads. We really need to shift our focus from individual limits to the macro organizational level because, frankly, that's where the real crisis is brewing. This is your absorption capacity. It's your organization's structural readiness to take that blazing fast AI-generated work, review it, coordinate it, and convert it into actual realized business value. Right now, your most productive employees are driving Formula One cars, but they're forced to drive them on horse-drawn roads. They're pushing lightning-fast outputs into sequential approval chains and endless legal reviews that were built for a completely different era. Just look at this staggering stat. 90%. 90% of your super productive workers report that AI actually creates more coordination work between team members. Your fastest workers are generating polished, market-ready outputs in a single afternoon that used to take weeks. But then, those outputs slam headfirst into a brick wall of limited review time, tight budget approvals, and agonizingly slow sign-offs. Let's break down exactly how this bottleneck plays out in your halls. First, you have the coordination cost. Fast work up front simply creates slow, multi-person traffic jams downstream. Second is the quality tax. Sure, speed boosts output, but those AI outputs often require heavy extra review before they actually meet your company's standards. And third, the rework loop. All that time saved up front, poof, it's gone when people have to manually repair or redo the AI's output. The productivity gains are absolutely real for the individual, for sure, but they're being entirely eaten up by these three forces before they ever see the bottom line. Section 4. Risks versus structural benefits, and the real cost of inaction. We really need to weigh the profound dangers of sticking with the status quo against the urgent need for a system redesign. If you ignore these absorption bottlenecks, you aren't just leaving money on the table, you are actively introducing risk. We're talking systemic rework loops, cascading coordination delays, and this is a big one, latent security debt. When AI generates code or content way faster than your security and quality teams can actually review it, vulnerabilities slip right through. But if you implement structural process updates, you unlock parallel work streams, real-time transparency, and drastically reduced lead times. Make no mistake, these bottlenecks are design choices. You chose your current approval processes, which means you absolutely have the power to redesign them. Which brings us to Section 5, transitioning to flow metrics, shifting from output to capacity. This is the final phase of our briefing, where we talk concrete strategy. We need to shift your management focus entirely away from pure production volume. I've provided a template here for tracking what we call time to value instead of just counting widgets. Look at the contrast here. Outdated metrics obsess over how many pull requests or documents got generated. Flow metrics, on the other hand, track time to value. That's the exact time from when an asset is produced to when it is actually put to use by the business. We have to stop relying on these sluggish weekly status meetings and move to live dashboards. We need to replace sequential, signature-heavy sign-offs with tiered authority and automated pre-checks. And your core KPI? It can no longer be raw hours saved. That doesn't matter if the work is stuck. It must be measuring handoff delays and stall points. So here is how this translates into a phased 90-day transition action plan to move your teams from output-based to flow-based management. First 30 days, phase 1. Replace visibility gaps. You need to implement real-time transparency dashboards so leadership can physically see where work is stalling out. Next 30 days, phase 2. Redesign those approval processes. Rip out the sequential chains and move to dynamic parallel workflows based on tiered risk. And in the final 30 days, phase 3, cement your absorption capacity metrics. Track every single stall point and handoff delay. It's time to stop treating AI as a tool to just supercharge individual typists and start redesigning your systems for true organizational capacity. I really want this quote to sink in. The bottleneck isn't production anymore, it's absorption. Your organizational value is strictly capped by the slower of these two rates. Your production rate has skyrocketed 10x, but your absorption rate, it's remained totally flat. The bottleneck didn't disappear, it just shifted from the creator to the reviewer. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. The technology is already here, your top employees are already using it. The only question remaining is your organizational infrastructure actually ready to absorb the immense output your super productive employees are already capable of generating? Thank you so much for your time today, executives. It's time to redesign for flow.
Let's look at what a human and AI hybrid model actually is. In this explainer, we look at the meaning of hybrid systems and explain why AI should never completely replace humans.
Let's jump right into this explainer, because if you've been following the industry, you already know we've hit a major roadblock. Researchers are calling it the model scaling paradox. We just keep building larger, exponentially more expensive models, but the second we deploy them in messy, complex enterprise environments, they fall flat. So today we're going to unpack the source research to understand exactly why throwing a bigger brain at the problem isn't working anymore. More importantly, we're going to treat this as a step-by-step tutorial on building your own multi-agent orchestration, because shifting to a distributed system is absolutely the key to unlocking true enterprise scale.
Here's our roadmap for the breakdown. We're going to cover why enterprise AI pilots fail, the multi-agent paradigm shift, routing with dynamic DAG topologies, adaptive memory and context buffers, compare finance versus medical incident response, and finally wrap up with security, reliability, and cost.
Section 1. Why enterprise AI pilots fail.
Okay, step 1 of our tutorial is recognizing the actual problem. We have to look at why highly capable models crumble outside the lab. In a demo, an AI is basically acting in a vacuum, right?
But put that same model into a production SaaS platform, like FinTech or healthcare, and suddenly it has to juggle real traffic, weird edge cases, and heavy operational loads. When an agent misfires or just completely loses the context of a conversation, that actually tells us something critical. It indicates the absence of an execution control layer, not a lack of intelligence. So if your team is losing trust because things break down and retries fail silently, you don't have a model problem. You have an architectural problem.
This comparison really hits the nail on the head. Traditional integration is like laying down rigid train tracks. It assumes the same input will literally always produce the exact same output. But AI models are probabilistic. When you try to force unpredictable, probabilistic AI behavior into a rigid, deterministic pipeline, it just snaps. So to build a reliable system, the foundation is shifting from simple, static data passing to stateful, context-aware execution. AI orchestration acts as the conductor, managing intelligent systems that actually have to reason and adapt on the fly.
Section 2. The multi-agent paradigm shift.
Which brings us to step 2 of building our multi-agent orchestration. We have to distribute the intelligence. I absolutely love this quote because it perfectly captures the shift. As complexity ramps up, we need an intelligence-first architecture that manages behavior and coordinates responses, not just something that connects pipes. A single model, I don't care how massive it is going to suffer from attention decay and context pollution if you give it too many tools. Orchestration solves this by taking the burden off that single soloist model and distributing it across a team of specialized agents. But how do you actually structure that team? Well, frameworks like AdaptOrch show us that workflow topology is a massive deal. You literally cannot use a one-size-fits-all structure here. AdaptOrch dynamically selects from 4 canonical topologies based on the specific domain characteristics. Sometimes you need agents running simultaneously in parallel execution. Other times it has to be sequential processing, where one finishes before the next starts. AdaptOrch uses a routing algorithm to map these dependencies out and dynamically pick the absolute best structure for the task.
And the results of doing that are wild. By dynamically selecting the right topology, AdaptOrch gets up to a 23% performance improvement over static baselines. And get this, that's using the exact same underlying models. It proves that orchestration design is a first-class optimization target. You don't necessarily need a newer, more expensive model, you just need a smarter topology.
Section 3. Routing with dynamic DAG topologies.
Now for step 3 of our architecture build, the routing mechanism. How do these frameworks physically map out decisions without the AI just hallucinating a random path or getting stuck in some infinite loop? They use a directed acyclic graph, or a DAG. If you rely purely on an LLM to figure out its next step, you're going to get hallucinated routing. A DAG acts as a hard mathematical safeguard. The subtasks are nodes, the dependencies are edges, and data only flows in one direction. It mathematically guarantees that the system cannot get trapped in an endless loop, making the whole thing deterministic and super auditable.
To see this in action, look at the GraphBit framework. It uses a Rust-based engine to govern routing through a DAG, treating agents essentially as type functions within the graph. Because of this topology-aware orchestration, GraphBit completely eliminates framework-induced hallucinations, 0. And not only does it massively improve the task success rate to over 67%, but it aggressively lowers the overall system latency down to roughly 12 milliseconds. That is blazing fast for deterministic execution.
Section 4. Adaptive memory and context buffers. But hey, routing is really only half the battle. If we feed these agents way too much history, they choke. So step 4 is all about adaptive memory orchestration. If you just dump a massive conversation history into a prompt, the agent loses focus. Look at the Memflow framework here. It uses an intent-driven orchestrator to strictly budget the context. First, a router classifies the intent. Then, a dedicated memory agent retrieves only the precise data needed. Finally, the answer generation agent gets a beautifully compact, clean context to work with. It externalizes memory planning entirely away from the language model. GraphBit takes a similar approach with a really clever 3-tier memory system. By isolating data into ephemeral scratch space, structured state, and external connectors, it completely prevents cascading context bloat during long-running pipelines. It's actually a lot like human memory. You have your quick scratchpad for active thoughts, your structured memory for core facts, and your external connectors, like Googling something, for the rest. Managing context buffers like this stops system bottlenecks dead in their tracks, and it drastically cuts your API costs because you aren't paying to reprocess massive, irrelevant blocks of text.
Section 5. Finance versus Medical Incident Response.
Now let's take these blueprints and compare implementation strategies in 2 high-stakes, mission-critical arenas. This table is fascinating because it shows how differently industries use this tech. In algorithmic trading, the framework deploys alpha, risk, and portfolio agents to maximize high-speed temporal market gains, successfully beating the S&P 500. It's all about speed and yield. But look at the Myant Farm framework for medical incident response. It's not trying to be the fastest. Its primary goal is flawless, deterministic quality. It accepts a 40-second comprehension latency just to cross-reference medical specialties and guarantee absolute exact correctness.
And the payoff for that medical system is staggering. Myant Farm achieved 100% actionable recommendation rate for incident response. Compare that to the single-agent approach, which hit a dismal 1.7% because the responses were just too vague to use. By orchestrating a multi-agent system, they saw a 140x improvement in solution correctness with zero quality variance. If you have production SLA commitments, structured orchestration isn't just nice to have, it's an absolute requirement.
Section 6. Security, reliability, and cost. For our final step, let's analyze how structured orchestration improves reliability and reduces operational costs for enterprise systems at scale. In cybersecurity, continuous fuzzing platforms are great at finding tons of bugs, but humans still have to manually write the patches, which is a massive bottleneck. Traditional automated repair just fails in noisy environments. But the Patch Island system solves this by integrating an orchestrated ensemble of LLM agents right into the continuous fuzzing pipeline to automate the vulnerability repair dynamically.
And it works incredibly well. Operating with zero human intervention, this orchestration layer successfully repaired over 72% of the vulnerabilities it found. That is 31 out of 43 deep system bugs patched autonomously by an AI orchestra. By structuring the workflow and distributing the cognitive load, enterprises can drastically reduce their human labor costs and operational bottlenecks while simultaneously making their systems way more reliable.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final thought. The future of AI isn't just about scaling up the brain, it's about perfecting the conductor that guides the orchestra. We've seen how DAGs provide those deterministic guardrails, how adaptive memory buffers kill context bloat, and how dynamic topologies pull way more performance out of the exact same models. Before you reach for the next massive, expensive language model to solve a complex enterprise problem, ask yourself, is your AI actually failing because it isn't smart enough, or is it failing because it's working alone, without a blueprint?
Okay, humans, looks like some of your jobs are still safe. In this next explainer, we look at why fully automated businesses plateau. We dissect all the reasons for why fully automated brands lose trust and credibility with their customers.
All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're tearing into what I call the AI customer service trap. We're going to conduct a full financial autopsy on the hidden costs of AI-driven support. Because look, I know the promise of zero wait times and zero overhead is incredibly tempting for any boardroom. But the reality? The very technology you're buying to optimize your business might actually be the exact thing that's quietly destroying your customer base. So let's look at the hard data and figure out what is really going on behind those automated chat windows. A lot of business owners right now genuinely believe that switching to a 100% AI customer service model is this brilliant, profitable optimization. It seems like the perfect way to scale up without scaling your costs, right? But you really have to ask yourself, are you actually automating support, or are you just automating frustration? Because there's a very good chance you're inadvertently building digital brick walls that lock out your best customers. When we swap out genuine human empathy for rigid algorithmic loops, we aren't automating service, we're just automating friction. And let me tell you, that friction comes with a massive, massive hidden price tag.
Get this is the crucial point right here. A staggering 56% of unhappy customers rarely even complain. They don't yell, they don't send an angry email, they just leave. They leave without ever giving you a single chance to fix the issue. We call this silent churn. Think about it. Over half the people having a terrible time with your automated system just aren't going to spend the energy fighting their way through a bot. They quietly take their wallet and they walk right over to your competitor. This invisible, silent attrition is an absolute killer for online businesses and subscription models.
Now, to really understand why this is happening, we have to completely reframe a metric that the corporate world absolutely loves to celebrate. I'm talking about ticket deflection. Treating every ticket that doesn't reach a human as a massive victory is actually a really dangerous vanity metric. Why? Because it assumes that just because the customer stopped trying to contact you, they must be satisfied. But equating silence with satisfaction is a lethal leap in logic. Your support dashboard might be glowing brilliantly green because your operational costs are down, but meanwhile, your actual revenue is just quietly bleeding out the back door.
And that customer frustration isn't just a theoretical concept, it is physical. When an AI forces your users into one of those rigid loops of doom, where it just repeats the exact same unhelpful answer no matter what you type in, it triggers genuine physical frustration. In fact, data shows a massive 667% year-over-year spike in mobile rage clicking, just from people trying to bypass a bot. We've literally all been there, just aggressively tapping the screen hoping to break the system or finally reach a real human. When your support channel is generating actual physical aggression in your users, you haven't solved a problem, you've created a brand crisis.
Plus, the extreme brand damage and legal liability of throwing unsupervised AI at your customers is very, very real. Look at the headlines. Air Canada's bot literally hallucinated a retroactive bereavement refund policy, and a legal tribunal ruled the airline was completely liable for the bot's lie. Or what about the delivery company DPD? A customer got their bot to swear and write a poem mocking its own company, which went incredibly viral, of course. Then there was Cursor's rogue AI, Sam, that just invented a fake one-device limit, sparking mass subscription cancellations. Oh, and my favorite, a Chevy dealership's bot that literally agreed to sell a 2024 Tahoe for $1. It's wild, but it proves a critical new reality. Under the law, you own your AI's mistakes.
Now, I'm definitely not saying AI is entirely useless. It's actually fantastic for what we call the happy path. These are your binary, totally predictable transactions. Password resets, tracking a package, things where the customer just wants speed. But it fails absolutely catastrophically on the unhappy path. These are the complex, highly emotional issues, service failures, messy billing disputes. In these moments, your customer is already anxious or angry. You absolutely need discretionary judgment and genuine human empathy to save that account. An algorithm just can't do it.
And the hard financial data behind that human empathy? It is staggering. This is not just about being warm and fuzzy, it is pure economics. Emotionally connected customers are 5.7 times more likely to trust you. They are 4.6 times more likely to forgive you for a mistake. And incredibly, they generate an 11.1 times higher Net Promoter Score. Let that sink in. Treating emotion like it's just some soft metric means you are actively ignoring the single strongest driver of long-term financial performance and customer lifetime value. In fact, if you handle the unhappy path really well, you get to leverage something amazing called the service recovery paradox. This is a very well-documented phenomenon where you can actually turn a total service failure into intense, long-lasting client loyalty. Think about it. A customer who has a huge problem, but it gets brilliantly and quickly fixed by an empathetic human on your team. They often become way more loyal than a customer who never had a problem to begin with. But the entire catch here is that this paradox completely relies on an authentic human connection to actually work. Because if you try to automate that emotional recovery, it will completely backfire. When your high-value clients are fed these scripted, uncanny valley automated apologies, they just feel insulted. They know the algorithm doesn't actually feel bad for them, and they know it doesn't have the authority to actually make things right. It just feels like incredibly cheap talk. Imagine you're a client paying thousands of dollars a year, and you get a generic, algorithmic apology. That immediately signals that you don't value the relationship enough to even assign a real person to save it, and that rapidly cements their decision to take their business elsewhere.
Furthermore, this human connection is about playing offense, not just defense. AI is entirely defensive. It just focuses on closing tickets as fast as computationally possible. But humans play offense. A good human agent reads emotional cues. They recognize when a customer is scaling up their business, and they can easily identify upsell opportunities just by understanding the why behind a customer's question. The data backs this up, showing human-led teams achieve 70% larger deal sizes. So, an AI-only model is often costing you thousands in lost account expansion revenue just so you can save pennies on operational efficiency.
Okay, so what's the solution here? To stop the silent churn, you need a hybrid approach. We call it the strategic gating model. You don't just abandon AI, you just stop using it as a brick wall and start using it as a sieve. Step 1 is the AI concierge. Let it handle the high-volume, simple transactional noise, fast and cheap. But step 2 is where the magic happens. The absolute second the AI detects frustration, complexity, or any high-stakes issue. Boom. The interaction is immediately routed to a human expert. No endless loops, no rage clicking, just a seamless, instant off-ramp to real human empathy.
Now, I hear business owners all the time saying, look, I simply cannot afford to hire local agents to staff that second gate. And it's a completely valid concern. A US-based support agent costs around $35,000 to $40,000 a year, and the local industry suffers from a staggering 45% turnover rate because it's so often treated as temporary gig work. But contrast that highly unsustainable overhead with the efficiency and stability of tapping into the top 1% of global teams. The real solution to this financial anxiety is that you have to decouple the word human from the word local.
By utilizing English-tested global support teams, you can access highly skilled, incredibly empathetic experts for just a fraction of the cost. Because these roles are viewed as highly desirable, prestigious careers globally, retention and institutional knowledge are off the charts. Your customers are talking to a seasoned expert, not a frustrated rookie. And this approach completely neutralizes AI's only real financial advantage. It gives you premium human intelligence at an operational cost that makes the hybrid model totally 100% viable.
And honestly, maintaining this human touch creates a massive advantage in the market right now. Did you know 72% of consumers are now willing to pay more just for a premium experience that guarantees a human connection? It's true. In a world where all of your competitors are racing to the bottom with cheap, frustrating automated service layers, offering a 100% human support guarantee literally becomes a luxury differentiator. People will gladly pay a premium just to know for a fact they won't get trapped by a bot.
Plus, it is absolutely vital to protect your brand's moat from something called algorithmic homogenization. As AI models increasingly just scrape and train on other AI-generated outputs, everything starts drowning in the sea of recycled mediocrity. Relying entirely on automated systems completely strips away the original storytelling, the distinctive personality, and the genuine empathy that makes your business unique in the first place. Your brand is your moat, and humans are the only ones capable of actually maintaining it.
So as we wrap up this financial autopsy, I really want you to ask yourself one critical question about your own company's support friction. If your customer is actively fighting just to reach you, how long until they just reach out to your competitor instead? That barrier you built to save a little bit of money might just be filtering your absolute best customers right out the door. Think about how adopting a hybrid human-first approach could turn your customer support from a frustration engine into an absolute long-term retention powerhouse. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.
In this next explainer, we look at a 5-layer framework you can build. See the entire behind-the-scenes design of a hybrid business model. Let's get into it.
All right. Welcome to today's explainer, everyone. I am absolutely thrilled to be sitting down with your executive team today because we are tackling what is arguably the single most critical challenge facing boardrooms right now. We're going to set the stage for taking AI out of the realm of chaotic, isolated little experiments and transforming it into scalable, safe, and truly autonomous business operations. So let's just dive right into the playbook.
Look, I want to kick things off with a number that should make every single leader in this room sit up and take notice. 70 to 85%. Let that sink in for a second. That is the staggering failure rate of unstructured AI projects. Without a totally rock-solid structured roadmap, up to 85% of AI initiatives just flat out fail to deliver their expected value. We're talking wasted investment, eroded stakeholder confidence, and a total loss of competitive advantage. The stakes for getting this right are frankly massive.
So to fix this, here's our playbook for today. We'll start with the AI failure reality, score the 5 pillars, and then walk through a 4-phase roadmap. From there, we'll dive into the new agentic AI era, how to actually govern that autonomy, and wrap up by aligning all of this with your business execution.
Okay, Section 1, the AI failure reality.
You know, a lot of boardrooms operate under this dangerous illusion that AI is a magic bullet. Like you can just buy it, plug it in, and watch the profits roll in. But a recent BCG survey completely shatters that myth. They found that 60% of companies globally are investing heavily in AI, but they are completely failing to see any material value. Why? Well, it's not a tech problem, actually. It's an execution problem. Jumping into AI seems like a no-brainer, but getting real, tangible value requires a deeply structured implementation plan, something most of these companies are severely lacking.
The way I see it, every company is making a choice right now. You are either drowning in what we call chaotic experiments, meaning you're chasing the tech without a clear why, you're fragmented, you're suffering from shiny object syndrome, or you are intentionally building scalable operations. This is where your AI adoption is actually driven by business needs, strategic alignment, and a real roadmap. Our entire goal today is to move you firmly out of the chaos and into those scalable operations.
Which brings us to Section 2, scoring the 5 pillars.
Before you spend a single dollar on new tech, you have to look under the hood. You need a diagnostic lens to evaluate your internal readiness. Enter the 5 pillars of AI: strategy, research, data, automation, and content. Developed by Optimus Consultant, this framework ensures that your adoption is driven by actual operational realities, not just the latest hype cycle. Think about it. Strategy is your true north. Research is your market intelligence. Data is about activating the information you're already sitting on. Automation tackles those soul-crushing, repetitive workflows, and content is how you scale your output. These pillars are all deeply, deeply interconnected.
What you need to do is walk through this step-by-step checklist, scoring your organization on each pillar internally from a 1 to a 5. For instance, you might score a 5 in data because you've got this massive, beautifully clean data lake. But you might score a 1 in automation because literally all your workflows are still manual. Scoring these pillars gives you a totally objective baseline. It pinpoints exactly where your operational gaps are hiding.
So I've got to challenge you right now. Where are your operational gaps? Keep in mind, these pillars reinforce one another. Incredible data dramatically improves your automation, and lightning-fast research sharpens your overall strategy. You absolutely must know your weak points before you can build a roadmap that actually works.
Now let's get into the how. Section 3, the 4-phase implementation roadmap.
Once you know your gaps, you need the prescription to cure them. This right here is the concrete journey that takes that terrifying 85% failure rate we talked about and drops it down to under 10%. We kick off in weeks 1 to 4 with the foundation phase, getting your strategy locked in and assessing your data. Weeks 5 to 12 are the expansion phase, where we execute tightly contained pilot projects. Weeks 13 to 24 are all about optimization, refining those models and getting your MLOps practices dialed in. And finally, month 6 and beyond is the innovation phase, which is when we focus on enterprise-wide scaling. You literally cannot jump to innovation on day 1. You have to earn it through those first 3 phases.
And notice how the budget maps perfectly to these milestones. In the foundation phase, you're only allocating 5 to 10% of your budget. But trust me, it dictates the success of absolutely everything else. The bulk of your investment, around 30 to 40%, actually hits during optimization, where you're refining these models for primetime production. This structured allocation totally flips the script on financial risk. It secures high ROI project funding because you're only spending the big bucks once the foundation and expansion pilots have proven they actually work.
All right, Section 4, the Agentic AI era.
So, the finish line of your roadmap isn't just a basic chatbot. We are shifting to incredibly dynamic systems that close the feedback loop in real time. We're talking about Agentic AI. These are autonomous systems that can perceive, reason, plan, and act with barely any human intervention. Instead of just highlighting a problem on a dashboard for you to look at, these systems evaluate the context, apply your business rules, and instantly trigger workflows to fix the problem automatically. It's a massive leap from passive measurement to active autonomous intervention.
And guys, this is causing a complete paradigm shift. Just look at this startling quote from MIT Sloan and BCG. 76% of companies view agentic AI as a coworker, not a tool. That is wild, right? These autonomous systems are literally stepping into high-value, collaborative roles right across the enterprise. We aren't just talking about software anymore. We are talking about dynamic participants in your daily workflows.
To make sense of all this capability, KPMG actually developed a brilliant model called the TAKO framework, which categorizes these agents by their complexity. First, you have taskers. They handle singular, repeatable tasks, like basic compliance screening. Next are automators that connect end-to-end workflows, like running a whole claims processing sequence. Then you have collaborators, which are your AI teammates that actually brainstorm alongside human operators. And finally, the Holy Grail, orchestrators. These manage entire multi-agent ecosystems, doing things like dynamically rerouting a global supply chain around a disruption. The potential here is just off the charts.
Moving on to Section 5, governing autonomous agentic systems. But, as we all know, incredible potential always comes with incredible risk. As these agents start taking on higher impact responsibilities, they're introducing a totally new spectrum of operational and reputational risks. You have got to build a structured, trusted foundation. Without this architecture, you're opening the door to the terrifying threat of misalignment, where the system decides to do something completely different from your intent, not to mention data privacy breaches and massive cascading failures. Trust has to be built right into the core of the system. So, what does that governance actually look like in practice? Here are the specific risk management strategies every C-suite absolutely must implement. Number 1, you need strict scope boundaries so that AI knows exactly what it is never allowed to do. You have to establish built-in fail-safe switches and fallback protocols. You need immutable logging so you always have a perfect, unchangeable audit trail.
You've got to deploy continuous AI red teaming to actively hunt for vulnerabilities. And crucially, you must set firm, non-negotiable triggers for human oversight.
And that brings us to a vital balancing act: autonomous action versus human-in-the-loop oversight. Look, agentic AI is totally unmatched when it comes to speed, consistency, and real-time execution. It will beat us every time. But humans, we provide the empathy, the nuanced strategic judgment, and the complex problem-solving that machines just fundamentally do not possess. The most successful organizations out there aren't trying to replace humans. They are strategically building hybrid teams that leverage the absolute best of both worlds.
Finally, Section 6, Aligning Business and Execution.
We really need to bring this all back to your ultimate goal. Remember this: feedback without action creates no value, and technology without strategy creates zero ROI. If you bypass those 5 pillars to diagnose your business and you ignore structured phased roadmap, even the most cutting-edge agentic AI is going to end up as just another expensive, chaotic experiment. Structure is the only thing that actually generates returns.
So I want to leave you with one final provocative thought today. Are you genuinely building a scalable, business-driven AI ecosystem, or are you just collecting chaotic experiments? Moving from chaos to scale doesn't happen by accident. It requires leadership, it requires structure, and a relentless commitment to aligning your tech directly with your business outcomes. The time to map out your strategy is right now. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I honestly cannot wait to see how you take this playbook and transform your organizations.
Humans, you're still needed. Yes, you heard that right. AI doesn't have our thinking, logic, understanding of complex topics, or our unique perspectives. All that AI can actually do is increase production results of simple, repeatable tasks. But let's have a look at the explainer to get a better understanding.
Welcome to The Explainer. I am so glad you're joining us today because I want to sit down and have some real talk with you about your career. If you're junior talent or really any rising professional right now, you're stepping into a workspace that is fundamentally different from the one I started in. I mean, you are surrounded by tools that can instantly generate content, analyze mountains of data, and build strategies that literally used to take teams weeks to produce. And look, the fear out there is that AI is just going to replace you. But I'm here to tell you why it absolutely won't. If and only if you learn to shift your mindset. You have to move away from being a manual executor and step up to become a strategic orchestrator. Okay, let's dive into this. Here is a question that honestly should make every single professional just a little bit uncomfortable. If artificial intelligence can process data faster, recognize patterns better, and calculate probabilities more accurately than you ever could, what exactly are you getting paid to do? Think about it this way. When calculators eliminated mathematical drudgery, mathematical thinking didn't suddenly lose importance, right? It just became the key differentiator between basic clerks and high-level strategists. So today, you've got to figure out what AI makes obsolete versus what it makes absolutely precious. Section 1. The AI Execution Trap. To understand why chasing every shiny new AI feature is actually a total trap, we have to look at a brilliant concept from cognitive science called Moravec's paradox. Formulated back in the 1980s, this is the observation that high-level reasoning, things like logic and complex math, actually requires very little computation. But low-level skills like perception, mobility, and emotional awareness, those require enormous computational resources. Think about it. We have spent millions of years evolving to simply read a room, to walk without tripping over our own feet, and to empathize with one another. Abstract reasoning is just a super thin, very recent veneer of human evolution. And this creates a really fascinating divide. Think about the execution layer, logic, algebra, basic drafting, summarizing documents. These are things highly educated people historically found very challenging. So we just kind of assumed they were the absolute peak of intelligence. Well, AI finds them incredibly easy. But then think about the judgment layer, empathy, bodily awareness, aesthetic judgment, or interpreting someone's actual hidden motivations. AI finds these things incredibly hard, if not completely impossible. And this brilliantly illustrates a famous quote by cognitive scientist Steven Pinker, who noted that the main lesson of decades of AI research is that the hard problems are easy and the easy problems are hard. Basic execution is literally being commoditized right before our eyes, but your human judgment, your unique ability to synthesize context, is becoming more precious than ever before. Section 2, Winning the Missing Middle. So if execution is basically commoditized now, where do you actually start adding value today? You really don't need to lead some massive, intimidating, enterprise-wide AI overhaul to be irreplaceable. You just need to conquer what's called the missing middle. Jennifer Sosnowski, a leader over at Merck, describes this missing middle as localized, workflow-level improvements. We're talking about small integrations that deliver immediate, massive value without needing some heavy, complex IT transformation. When I'm mentoring a new hire, I always tell them, the biggest gains in your early career are not going to come from massive overhauls. They come from optimizing your own specific day-to-day workflows. But how do you actually do that without getting completely distracted by complex, fragile, no-code templates? Well, AI strategist Alex Greenspon advises taking a strategy-first approach. Step 1, just use the tools you already have. Seriously, start by plugging Gemini into Google Sheets. Step 2, solve one real, specific bottleneck. Not a hypothetical one you think might happen, a real one. And step 3, automate only once you know the workflow actually succeeds in practice. Please don't chase those end-to-end agents that promise to do your entire job for you. Just stack small, reliable wins. Just look at the real-world impact of this exact mindset. In one example from Merck, a team used a large language model to take a routine town hall reporting task, something that previously took multiple people 8 full hours to complete, and they reduced it to seconds. Seconds. That is the power of the missing middle. You aren't replacing the team, you are freeing them from tedious execution so they can finally focus on higher-level strategy. Section 3. Your true career moat. Let's move to and see how this builds into your true career defense. Because here's the reality. Eventually, everyone is going to have that exact same 8-hour to seconds productivity boost. Speed is simply no longer an advantage. As Alex Greenspun points out, if AI commoditizes execution, your edge won't come from a productivity and efficiency boost. It comes from the exact traits that a machine cannot replicate: your taste, your empathy, and your authenticity. I'm giving you some real talk here. Your defense against becoming completely obsolete relies entirely on your deeply human characteristics. So let's break down exactly how you defend against that generic sea of AI slop. First up is taste. This is knowing how to filter and guide machine output so it actually resonates, rather than just sounding like a robot wrote it. Next is empathy. That's understanding what your client or customer actually cares about in their specific, messy, everyday reality. And finally, authenticity. This is all about fostering real human-to-human trust and building community. You really cannot fake this stuff anymore. Seriously, today, roughly 75% of audiences can already detect manufactured AI-generated tones in communication. The era of that over-polished, neutral corporate speak, it's dying. Sincerity and accountability are now the absolute most valuable currencies you have. If there is a name on a piece of work, a human has to own it. Section 4, the value of judgment. This brings us right to the core of your new role. You know when a seasoned leader talks about having a gut feeling about a decision, they aren't talking about mystical nonsense. The experts at Dowling Street highlight fascinating neuroscience research, showing this is actually embodied intelligence. It's your brain simultaneously processing rational data, emotional significance, and bodily awareness to create accumulated wisdom. An AI will never, ever have a gut feeling, because it literally doesn't have a gut. It doesn't understand office politics, cultural friction, or hidden agendas. Now, what's really interesting about this framework is how it practically combines raw computational power with your human wisdom. They call it the IQ plus EQ plus AI framework. Layer 1 is just letting AI do what it does best, processing massive data sets and finding patterns. But Layer 2 is where you step in with human pattern recognition. You're interpreting what that data actually means in your specific company culture. Layer 3 is integrating emotional intelligence, asking yourself, how will the team actually react to this? And Layer 4 is wisdom-based synthesis. That's applying your unique context to make a hard strategic choice. See, you aren't just accepting the first draft, you are orchestrating it. Section 5, the new strategy playbook. So how do we put all this into practice every single day? Well, research into how people genuinely use ChatGPT reveals 6 distinct modes. But look at how it breaks down. A massive 47% of usage is just writing, drafting emails and summarizing docs. Another 10% is identifying, basically answering factual questions. The vast majority of people are completely stuck using AI as a glorified typewriter or an overhyped search engine, and they are completely missing out on the higher value strategic modes. Now, writing and identifying sit firmly in the execution layer. If you're only using AI to, say, write emails faster or summarize PDFs, you are actively positioning yourself as an execution layer worker at the exact moment AI is compressing that entire layer. Your irreplaceability lives in the judgment layer, deciding between strategic trade-offs, ideating entirely new angles, critiquing your own work, and talking through really high-stakes scenarios. So the crucial point is this. If you only use AI to execute faster, you are going to fall victim to the Red Queen effect. This is an evolutionary concept where basically everyone has to run faster just to stay in the exact same place. If you and all your competitors are using the exact same AI tools to generate the exact same strategies based on the exact same historical data, it inevitably leads to cognitive convergence. You're going to end up making the exact same homogenized, incredibly boring choices as everyone else. To break out of that trap, here is exactly what I tell my direct reports. You must operate in the judgment layer. Use AI for ideating. And I don't mean just asking for 5 blog post ideas. Have it map out conceptual gaps your competitors have completely missed. Use it for critiquing. Have the AI pressure test your strategy and find your weak assumptions before your boss does. And use it for talking. Role-play a really difficult client pushback conversation with the AI as a partner, just to sharpen your own human delivery. Because ultimately, you are the final filter. As privacy attorney Caitlin Ringrose reminds us, a human is always liable. The machine never is. Trust, transparency, and accountability, those can never be outsourced to an algorithm. When an AI makes a massive mistake, it's not the machine that gets fired. It's the human who blindly passed along that unreviewed output. I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to take into your work tomorrow. Take a hard look at your daily habits and ask yourself honestly, are you using AI to make your judgment better or just your output faster? It is time to stop competing with the machine on speed. Start developing the strategic wisdom, the taste, and the empathy that makes you truly indispensable. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll get you in the next one.
In this next explainer, we'll have a look at a practical workflow for content production as an example business process. Obviously, each business is different, and the design of the process needs to be adapted to your situation. Let's see it in action.
Welcome to this masterclass explainer. Today, we're building a visual checklist together. The goal? Deploying a high ROI, human-in-the-loop AI content engine. We are going to completely transform how you think about scale. Forget those chaotic, manual processes that burn everyone out, and definitely forget those dangerous, cheap AI shortcuts. Instead, we're going to build a system that multiplies your output without losing your brand's unique soul. Sound good? Let's dive right in. To set the stage here, we really have to recognize this massive tension we're all facing. There's this impossible demand for content scale, right? But on the flip side, there's a very real danger of producing emotionally inert, generic AI copy. You see, the manual approach is just a bottleneck. It's wildly expensive, and it absolutely burns out your best talent. But flipping the switch to an AI-only approach, that is a total trap. It just pumps out this robotic, cookie-cutter content that literally puts your readers to sleep, and worse, gets you penalized by search engines. We desperately need a third way. Here's our syllabus for today. We're going to cover the human-AI hybrid model, legal and brand guardrails, the 4-step creation workflow, formatting for AI citations, refreshing stale pages, and finally, tracking real revenue. All right, kicking things off with Module 1, the human-AI hybrid model. Let's talk about roles in the pipeline. Listen, if you take nothing else away, remember this foundational rule. AI executes well, but it does not strategize well. It is an absolutely incredible force multiplier for all that heavy lifting, but the narrative, the cultural nuance, the empathy, that must originate from a human expert. Honestly, if you outsource your strategy to a machine, you instantly lose your competitive advantage. So, how do we solve this? We use what's called the barbell strategy. Picture an actual barbell with heavy weights at both ends. You're putting heavy human effort at the start, creating the core narrative and the strategy, and heavy human effort at the end for the final review. In the middle, that bar itself is the AI. It acts as a sort of translator waterfall, taking that single, brilliant, high-quality human idea and cascading it across 10 different formats, like social posts, newsletters, or video scripts. It's a real game changer. Moving on to Module 2, Legal and Brand Guardrails. This is all about protecting your voice. Before you even open a prompt window, you absolutely must create this visual checklist, the Positioning Guardrails Brief. Think of this as the master creative brief your AI works from every single time. It concretely defines your core value proposition, the specific claims you are legally forbidden to make, and gives real examples of what sounds like your brand versus what definitely doesn't. Without this brief, your AI model will just default to the boring category average and completely erode your brand identity. For this next part, we're actually borrowing a concept from strict pharmaceutical regulations, specifically EU GMP Annex 22. Kind of wild, right? But in high-stakes environments, they require human-in-the-loop compliance. You need to integrate these same mandatory legal and compliance guardrails right into your marketing workflow. By using role-based access control and keeping strict audit logs of your AI interactions, you're making absolutely sure that AI outputs never, ever bypass expert human judgment. The human always holds the keys. Okay, Module 3, the 4-step creation workflow. Time to take this from theory to execution. Here is your complete operational pipeline, laid out step by step. You start with human-led intake and briefing. Then you move into step 2, AI-assisted drafting. Crucially, step 3 is human review and compliance. And finally, step 4, AI flips out with multi-format distribution. This structure is brilliant because it ensures you're utilizing powerful AI writing assistants without ever losing your structural oversight. Looking at a side-by-side comparison of a generic post versus a human-diagnosed theme post, you can see exactly why human editing is so vital. Think of it like this. The AI provides a really sturdy skeleton, but the human editor, they add the muscle, the heartbeat, and the soul. By injecting specific diagnosed pain points, like, say, the exact number of hours wasted per week or very specific workflow bottlenecks, rather than just listing vague benefits, you transform a totally bland output into something that genuinely resonates with the buyer. This checklist of specific quality guardrails is totally non-negotiable. Your human reviewers have got to verify these exact elements. A subject matter expert checks the facts for accuracy, an editor jumps in to sharpen the tone and make it conversational, and finally, someone from legal or brand reviews for any risk areas before sign-off. This is the exact mandatory process that takes a 70% completed AI draft and turns it into a 100% polished, authentic asset. Moving right along to Module 4, Formatting for AI Citations. Let's talk about earning those AI citations. So here's a crucial thing to understand. AI summarizers weigh the very beginning of passages incredibly heavily. Actually, they read a lot like skim-reading humans. This means you really need to adopt the bluff principle. That stands for bottom line upfront, a military communication tactic. You must provide a concise 100-word direct summary right at the top of your content to earn that AI citation. Whatever you do, do not bury the lead. Next up is entity-rich writing. Instead of tossing out vague statements like, "This tool helps with search," you want to use specific entities. Say something like, "Our platform helps B2B marketers optimize content." Giving large language models that exact concrete context is exactly what they need to understand the semantic relationships and actually pull your content into their generated answers. I highly recommend you take a screenshot of this visual checklist for rapid implementation later. These exact formatting techniques will exponentially increase the probability of your content getting extracted by AI. You want to write atomic content, meaning every section can stand entirely on its own. Use short, punchy, declarative sentences. And please explicitly attach your brand name to your unique frameworks. Otherwise, AI is just going to absorb your brilliant original ideas as generic knowledge without giving you a drop of credit. Now for Module 5, refreshing stale web pages. It's time to revive those sleeper pages. 76%. Let that sink in. This staggering statistic reveals that out of the top-cited pages in AI engines like ChatGPT, over 3/4 of them were updated within the last 30 days. Think about what that means for us. If your content hasn't been touched in 6 months, you are already at a severe, massive disadvantage for getting an AI citation. These engines prioritize freshness heavily. So here is your concrete, practical exercise for reviving those high-authority sleeper pages. Step 1, find pages that already have great backlinks but are currently losing traffic. Step 2, use AI to scan them against current search intent to identify any glaring content gaps. Step 3, have your human experts jump in to update the actual facts and inject fresh insights. And Step 4, republish to trigger re-indexing. You're essentially leveraging AI to modernize the structure while your humans provide the fresh, nuanced expertise. Finally, Module 6, tracking revenue over vanity metrics. Let's focus on meaningful metrics. Look, you absolutely need an analytics layer integrated with your CRM to stop chasing vanity metrics. We're talking about those meaningless likes, impressions, and generic page views. Instead, you need to start tracking real content to revenue pipeline metrics. Think things like discovery calls booked, high-quality inbound DMs, actual newsletter signups, and direct citations in AI answers. Tracking your visibility in AI summaries and measuring the quality of those inbound leads from conversational search is vital. It's exactly how you prove that your hybrid system is actually working. Plus, it helps you justify the investment in both your shiny new AI tools and the human creators who oversee them. You have to prove that your content is a powerful organic growth engine, not just an inexpensive cost center. Our entire philosophy today really boils down to this one thought. AI will accelerate production, but humans will elevate meaning. Ultimately, the absolute most impactful content emerges when teams strike this perfect harmony. You use AI to clear out all those logistical bottlenecks and do the heavy lifting, which frees up your humans so their creativity and empathy can actually flourish. So I'm going to leave you with this provocative question. Are you building a generic content factory, or are you building a human-in-the-loop AI engine that drives real pipeline revenue? Take these checklists back to your team today. Map out those guardrails, implement that barbell strategy we talked about, and start reclaiming your work week while actually scaling your brand's authority. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I will catch you in the next one.
The goal of creating a human and AI workflow is not for us humans to do less work, but to build systems that can amplify our productivity. This can be done using AI tools to do mundane, repetitive work, while we direct the process, overseeing and validating results while rejecting worthless ones. The ultimate goal is to leverage AI for speed of production. Let's see this final explainer to round off this video.
All right, let's get started. Welcome everyone to today's explainer. I'm stepping into the role of your CTO for this session because we are absolutely at a critical juncture. We are finally ready to transition this organization from a series of fragmented, isolated AI experiments into a cohesive, enterprise-wide strategy. The goal here is long-term, sustainable competitive advantage. We're going to look closely at how we leverage our technology not just to cut a few costs, but to completely reinvent how we compete in the market.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll kick things off with the micro-productivity trap, shift our mindset from simple automation to orchestration, map out the intelligent automation continuum, and discuss systems thinking and human synergy. Then, we'll outline our phased transition to intelligent workflows and wrap up with how we'll be governing for competitive advantage. Let's dive right in.
First up, the micro-productivity trap, and honestly, the very real cost of stalled AI pilots. To really get where we're going, we have to acknowledge a painful reality about the current state of our digital transformation.
Think about this for a second. 1%. A recent McKinsey study found that literally only 1% of enterprise leaders believe they successfully achieved AI integration across multiple core processes. Just 1%. Which means, the vast majority of businesses are completely stuck. We're all deploying tools and running flashy pilots, but we just aren't seeing that true enterprise-wide transformation.
And that 1% figure highlights a very specific danger, which is the micro-productivity trap. It happens when we treat generative AI as just another fancy cost-cutting tool, right? A simple labor substitute. We end up with dozens of disconnected proofs of concept. Sure, they might deliver a modest efficiency gain for one specific team, but they absolutely fail to scale. We have got to stop viewing AI as a tactical tool and start treating it as core enterprise infrastructure, exactly like we did with cloud computing.
Which brings us to our second point, the paradigm shift required to move from basic automation to systemic orchestration.
Okay, so here's the crucial difference. Think of basic automation, like your standard robotic process automation, or RPA, as a player piano. It perfectly executes a single, predetermined routine. It's great, but it's limited. Orchestration, on the other hand, is like conducting a massive multi-keyboard concert rig. It uses intelligent logic to manage entire, multi-step business processes. It makes decisions on the fly, it synchronizes different triggers, and it dynamically adapts based on continuous real-time input.
Because of this massive leap, AI is no longer just a digital tool sitting on a desktop. It's becoming an active participant in our enterprise system. We are essentially shifting from task-based work, where a human just uses a piece of software to complete an isolated action, to system-based work,
This means our future operational agility depends entirely on how effectively our human talent and our AI coordinate to produce strategic outcomes together.
So, how do we actually get there? Let's talk about the intelligent automation continuum and our tiered migration plan.
Our migration path across this continuum basically has 3 tiers. Down at the foundation, we have doing bots. That's your standard rule-based RPA, automating the simple handwork. Once we nail that, we move up to thinking bots, which use machine learning to handle medium-level complexity. And then we reach the expert level, learning bots. These are cognitive systems capable of complex judgments, unstructured data processing, and continuous adaptation. They automate the headwork.
And why are we pushing so hard for this? It all comes down to one incredibly powerful concept: leverage. In business, just like in physics, leverage is about applying the absolute minimum input to achieve maximum output. By aggressively moving up this continuum, we minimize the manual input required for daily operations, which exponentially compounds our strategic output, our innovation velocity, and ultimately our relevance in the market.
Moving on to area number 4, systems thinking and human synergy, because we absolutely cannot look at these technologies in a vacuum.
If we want true organization-wide alignment, we need a systems thinking approach built on 4 core principles. First, wholeness and interconnection. AI has to be an integral part of operations, not some siloed IT project. Second, feedback loops. We need continuous data exchange so the system constantly recalibrates our strategy. Third, emergent properties. We have to evaluate the collective behavior of the entire enterprise, not just individual departments. And finally, adaptability. Creating a cohesive network that dynamically responds to disruptions so we can actively protect our EBIT margins.
Now, as AI takes over more of that execution layer, the role of our human talent fundamentally changes. It's way beyond just teaching people how to write a clever prompt. Our teams have to evolve into what industry experts call context curators. Humans will be responsible for shaping the intended outcomes, defining the scope, and setting the ethical and operational guardrails. This human-machine collaboration creates fluency knowledge, a level of insight that neither of them could ever produce on their own.
And the return on this synergy is absolutely wild. Bain Research recently highlighted a major bank that completely redesigned their customer engagement process from the ground up using agentic AI, systems that can independently pursue complex goals. By letting the AI handle the heavy analytical lifting while humans curated the overarching strategy, they literally doubled their customer lifetime value. And they tripled customer advocacy while they were at it. That is the power of true human-AI synergy.
All right, on to phase 5, the actual phase transition to intelligent workflows. How do we systematically execute this vision without breaking our current operations?
We follow a very strict 4-phase execution roadmap. Phase 1 is assessment. We meticulously map out relationships and knowledge flows across the business. Phase 2 is design, architecting those crucial feedback loops we just talked about. Phase 3 is implementation, rolling out the automation in controlled phases with rigorous monitoring. And phase 4 is evolution, treating the AI as a living system that we continuously analyze and refine. This guarantees we integrate human talent with cognitive systems safely and efficiently.
Let me give you a real-world example of this, drawn directly from MIT's advanced training for supply chain leaders. They're applying deep learning and advanced time series forecasting, leveraging incredibly sophisticated techniques like state space models to global tracking data. By doing this, organizations are actually predicting maritime port congestion before it even happens. They can autonomously reroute shipments, compress lead times, and basically eradicate supply chain bottlenecks entirely. That is intelligent workflow orchestration in action.
Which brings us to our final and frankly most important section, governing for competitive advantage.
The reality is, none of this scales without a top-down mandate and rigorous governance. Our KPIs demand shared ownership across the entire C-suite. This transformation cannot rest solely on the shoulders of IT. As CTO, yes, I am accountable for platform governance and model reuse. But our CHRO has to own the cultural transformation and AI literacy of our workforce. And our CFO needs to champion entirely new financial models, metrics that measure long-term, capability-driven returns rather than just short-term headcount savings.
Grassroots experimentation is fantastic, but it does not self-organize into an enterprise strategy. We need an executive mandate. Just look at Shopify's CEO. He recently mandated AI integration into daily workflows, essentially telling teams they have to prove why AI cannot do a task before they are allowed to add more headcount. That level of expectation is exactly how you force systemic business redesign.
And the financial imperative here is undeniable.
Companies that are pivoting away from traditional labor arbitrage and instead embracing learning systems and zero-based process redesigns are seeing massive returns. Early leaders who are truly redesigning their businesses with AI at the core are now delivering double the EBIT margins of their competitors. The financial gap between the leaders and the laggards is widening extremely fast.
So I'll leave the board with this provocative thought as we wrap up today's explainer. Are we going to keep using AI merely to execute isolated, mundane tasks and stay stuck in that micro-productivity trap, or are we ready to roll up our sleeves, orchestrate these systems across our entire enterprise, and completely reinvent how we compete? It is time to build our sustainable competitive advantage. Thank you all for your time today. Let's get to work.
Now that we've looked at the process of building a human and AI workflow, will you go out and implement it in your business? Let us know if you learned something from the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Remember to hit that notification bell so that you're notified when we post every Thursday. Have a great week. See you in the next video.